We're live and welcome to a Yarn Live. Today's special edition is with none other than Yvonne Daymond. So let me tell you a little bit of the backstory to what we're doing today, and then of course we'll get Yvonne to introduce herself. So my name is Ryan the Lion, and this is Yarn Live, an extension of A Few Quiet Yarns, and specifically this is for AFQY Women. And this comes from International Women's Day and the success that the event that we hosted had in terms of the impact with the feedback from the various women who said, I'm going to go and do this now, and I'm going to do that, and I'm not going to worry about imposter syndrome, and I'm inspired by this story. So we had our first session with Jolie and Justine doing the only chair and CEO combination. Now we have Yvonne Daymond, who has a stellar career with all of the blue chip, whether it be client side or service side, the ministries, the brands like IBM, Unisys, you name it. It's what I would call a stellar career. And I can see Yvonne cringing at what I'm saying right now. So I am going to say that her humility is probably one of the great aspects to her career and her leadership, which you will hear as she speaks. So probably with that, I can be quiet and get into our first question, which as always is to ask you, Yvonne, and thank you for being a guest, but to ask you if you could introduce yourself so we can meet you as the person, and then we'll talk about all the career and the business after that.
Morning, I'm Yvonne Daymond. I'm a Fijian, full Fijian, from Naivadula in Thai level in Fiji, on the island of Viti level, for those of you who know the island. I grew up here in New Zealand and have been living in Wainumarta for years. We have 3 boys, Joseph, Ethan and Eli. And yeah, we just are a family, live, work, hang out.
That's brilliant. So oh look, there's already one in there saying, hey auntie, smash it. Who's that? Oh, that's Amy Daymond. I know your niece. I wondered actually. I had it in my head, and I was going to ask, and then I was like, no, that's like someone asking, because you live in Dunedin, Ryan. Do you know? No, there's more than 100,000 people in Dunedin. How cool!
It's like people ask if you say you're a Fijian, and go, "Oh, do you know so and so?" No, sorry, I'm rubbish. I don't.
Well, there's something like 300 islands as part of Fiji. So
the archipelago, yeah.
I was blown away when I discovered that. My one and only time to Fiji, which is absolutely beautiful, and probably one of the most beautiful aspects, as everyone will say, are the people. So yeah, had a wonderful time there and made some great friends that I'm still in touch with thanks to Facebook. So if we, you mentioned that you've got 3 kids.
3 boys. Yeah.
Sorry.
They're not really kids anymore. 3 boys. No? Yeah.
3 boys. Okay, so they're sort of adult children now.
The 2 elder ones are in their 20s, and then the baby's 16.
The baby's 16.
Navigating. Yeah, the baby. So we're still navigating the intricacies of teenage stuff. School.
Wanting a license, getting a license, parties. Yeah, all the good stuff, and just about to embark on his career, or the beginning of his career. So that takes us back to the beginning of your career. How did you get started in IT? If you could take us through that story.
So I used to work for Department of Social Welfare. It's now Ministry of Social Development, and I took I call it a secondment into a test for there was going to be a replacement of the benefit and payment system. So I took a secondment as a tester. So that sounds all great, but I was like, I think maybe 19, turning 20, and got into testing, realised I'm not very good at it and I didn't understand it, as most teenagers probably attest to. And so I started writing. You had to write out why code didn't work or whatever the case would be. And I started writing stories about the code because that was about the most interesting part of it. And then some of those stories were being published in the think it's the Government Gazette at the time. And then a woman who worked there at Tritech out in Lane Street, Upper Hutt, she asked me if I would be interested in doing this business analysis thing. So I went and did that with her, and she just said it was facilitating workshops to get requirements out of users. Again, didn't really understand that. Just thought, oh, it's a chance to just talk to heaps of people. Just do that instead of sitting around with a bunch of super clever software developers that I didn't understand their language, and they probably didn't understand me. And then basically just fell into it, went back into my frontline job after doing that secondment, and then a job got advertised in wherever it was advertised for a BA in head office for social welfare. And so I applied for it and I got an interview, and then I got the job. I wasn't really expecting it because I didn't really have any experience, and I still didn't really understand what this technology thing was about. But I knew that I didn't want to keep working frontline because of the nature of the work that we were doing and what we were exposed to. So I wasn't equipped to deal with that either. So I went into head office and worked in a BA team, a business analysis team, with people who had degrees and had written thesis about technology stuff and spoke a language I didn't really understand. And just thought, oh, I quite like this. I'm just writing documents, like I kind of like this, and I'm learning stuff. And then so once I got in there, we got to meet the government had brought in Americans to help with this benefit payments replacement system. And so I got working alongside them and met the senior manager at the time was a woman from the States, Corinda Silva, and she was amazing. So I thought, well, I'll just like get her advice on the stuff and learn from her, and then went from there. I got made redundant from social welfare a million years ago, and then got offered a job at EDS, which was Electronic Data Systems at the time. They were subsequently purchased by Hewlett Packard. So I ended up working at EDS in this BA role, and the role was really, because again, I applied for the job, didn't really have any skills or really understand it, and so the job that I took on was to actually help the BA frame up what the user requirements were. And so sitting with him and getting information out of him was kind of easy, and then putting it together, I realized it was a jigsaw puzzle. Back in that day, it's called Agile now, but it was called Unified Modeling. And so the software development shops, particularly internationally, they were using Unified Modeling. And so the behavior of it was Agile. So that was, we still had electricity for those of you that are young, but it's the originating starting point for the Agile framework, basically. And so we used to do a lot of modeling, use cases, and use a lot of modeling tools, and then doing traceability and all that jazz. And so I learned that stuff because I read, and I was working with Americans, and they showed me this site. This was even before, like, the internet was still in its like starting point, so it was really basic. But the Americans had shown me this bookstore called Amazon, and so I used to save up my pay and order these unified modeling books so I could do the research on what they would be talking about. And so I got references from the guys I worked with of what books I should be reading. And so that's basically how I kind of kicked it all off. I started researching all that stuff, bought the books off Amazon, got them delivered, and read and learned, and took that back into the team that I was working in, and it worked, really simply. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I absolutely love it. I've been putting in some comments and time stamping, and they're kind of some good notes for some questions I'd like to come back on. So one of it was your quote, which said, I applied for the job, I didn't really know it, and I didn't understand it. So a couple of things on that, because we spoke earlier in the week about some of these aspects. And this one we didn't quite speak about, but I did some networking training for Microsoft and specifically for women. So I had to atone my normal networking course, how to do this, how to do that for women, and the problem that, well, not problem, challenges or differences And what I discovered is that men will apply for a job with no qualifications, no idea, no way of knowing, but they'll still give it a, there's something like 30 or 45% knowledge. Women wouldn't apply for a job unless they had 90 to 95% knowledge. So for your statement to say, I didn't know it, didn't understand it, and you applied for it, that is a huge piece of leadership in terms of giving it a go, getting stuck in, and not letting the not quite sure what the right label is. I was going to say stereotypical or gender bias of how women typically won't go for things that they aren't confident they can do, whereas men, and this is partly why men, one of the reasons why men proceed and women don't proceed as fast or as much, because women believe they need to have 95-100% capability before going for it, whereas men will say yes now and work it out later. So huge congratulations.
I think it depends on how you're made, right? Like I'm the person that will just go, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then get in it and go, it's sort of like this situation. Yeah, I'll do that. Then go, oh, actually, I don't want to do that. But it's too late, I'm in. So, you know, you kind of just have to suck it up. But also, like, to put it in context, it's not like I was some young person who just did it because I didn't have any other reason. It's just, I was a young mum. So I wasn't getting paid very much. It was clear that I didn't see a career path with through the government space and technology at the time, which is language I'm using now because I'm old, but I didn't know that then. And I just simply saw it as my boss didn't like me. I didn't really understand the group I worked with. And once the Americans went back, there wasn't really sort of you didn't get a global sense of where this IT thing could take you in the country at the time. And especially like the country at the time, it was about banking. You worked for social welfare, or you worked for justice, or you worked for any of the local factories that are now all closed and replaced by apartments, or you did whatever you did, and that was kind of the thing. And so I knew that as a young mum, I couldn't afford to have to do the things I wanted to do, basic stuff, pay my bills, feed my kid, on the salary I was on. And so I knew by working with the Americans what they were getting paid. And then I started like getting to know people and sort of asking, without making it obvious, what they were getting paid. And I was like, I don't really know if I'm into that. So then when I went to EDS, it was driven by the fact that I wanted to just test where this could go, really, and test myself, and not really tell anyone what I was doing, because I didn't want anyone to like question me, because I do that enough myself and worry me, which, you know, is kind of natural. And I just wanted to do it and see if I liked it. And so that's basically as simply as it went. Yeah. So looking after your kid is a great motivator, I think, and anyone can, you know, attest to that.
Absolutely. So I assume that through that wee part of the early stage of working at MSD, doing the secondment to BA, then applying for a BA role and getting it, somewhere in there, that's where you had your first of your 3 kids. And
so I had one, yeah. Simply yes. Yeah.
Okay. No, because where I was going with that, not to pick on the wrong parts or make an awkward discussion, was that let's start lining them up. So you're a woman in IT, Pacific Islander, and added to that a mother. So those are the sort of the 3 big things around the National Women's Day that are discussions around part of, you know, how women are perceived and discredited for various things. Oh, you've got children. Well, you'll need to go and take care of them. I remember my mum, so she was working in tech and I was a little kid at school, and some of the comments that she got around, so who's looking after your kid? And she's like,
yeah, and you would be asked that all the time. You get interviewed. Yeah.
And she's like, is it school at 3 o'clock? So she said, school's looking after him. He's at school at 3 o'clock, and then his big brother will. So yes,
Yeah.
and by the way, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, and
those
you know, all those years ago, you would go for a job, and that's what the recruiter would ask you. And I would ask you, "Oh, you're a young mum. Oh, you're a single mum. Holy, that's even worse." And that's how it felt. That's probably not what they intended, but the premise of those times was that you were a mum who would be looking after your children instead of rocking up. And I remember walking away from job interviews thinking, "Oh, I'll never go back to that agency again. They're so stupid. They're such dicks," and just going, I'm just not gonna put myself through this. I'm just gonna keep working and learning more and learning more. And I'm going to work out how to write my CV, and I'm going to work out what language I should be what language I should be using, how I tune up, like what is it? Because when I worked, particularly at social welfare and national office at the time, and it's no disrespect to anyone who is listening, when I worked there, I did not look like anyone in the building. Like the executive at the time, they were these gorgeous, sparkly women with blonde hair and earrings and looked amazing. And that's not my context or even who would attempt to even fit in with that. And so I was trying to work out, what are all the parts of a business that make it work. And if I'm sitting in this IT space, and at the time, the only other option you had really was to just go into the help desk, which is probably not too different to today. But I just decided that I know myself. I can't sit on a phone and talk to people because I don't really feel like that's my thing. It's a challenge on the best of days, but yeah.
well,
And so,
this
yeah,
takes
so I just
me
kept doing what I was doing.
very cool. So this takes me back to the earlier point. You've mentioned things like a couple of times around how you saved your money, bought the books, and started doing your research on unified modelling at the beginning. But you then, through different parts, you've sort of reiterated that doing your research, working things out, etc. And I'll come back to that because first I just want to recognise a couple of comments. So there was Ian Holm who had put in that he agrees with you. It depends on who you are, depends on your makeup, and not all men have the confidence to go for roles, Ryan, but I agree with the sentiment. And then Rob Lynch said 100% agree. And I've got to say, gentlemen, that
That's really nice.
yes,
I know them both.
you know them both? Yeah? So I myself didn't apply for roles that I should have been able to do. And I also, when I moved from Dunedin to Auckland, I applied for 10 roles that I had no qualifications for and got 2 offers. Whereas in Dunedin, I got told I was overqualified for 6 jobs, and there was only 6 jobs available that I could do at the time, or that I had skills for, unless I wanted to go and do something completely new and different. Let's choose fruit picking or shelf stacking, 2 pretty popular COVID things at the moment. So yeah, within my field, there were 6 jobs I was overqualified for in Dunedin, and 10 jobs I had no idea, no qualifications for, and I got 2 offers in Auckland. Who can explain it? So yeah, I can understand that it's horses for courses, or who how things are at the time and how you
Well,
feel.
it's about also a lot relies on the person that you're going to meet. Like I when I was at EDS, I was there. I was lucky. I was there for years, contracting across different client engagements, and then went overseas and did some work there. Only because of my husband. So I was really lucky in that respect. So I did some free work for the company to frame up some stuff, some delivery stuff for them around transformation. And even then, I didn't really know what a transformation was. Like I was helping out because I was bored, and being a mum at home in a foreign country was great, but I kept getting lost. And so I was like, this is so stressful trying to take the children on these educational um, journeys around the city, and I'd just get lost and didn't know where I was going. It was just horrendous. So I thought, okay, I'm rubbish at this, so I'll just go back to work. So just started doing some free work and wrote some documents and then helped them frame out how they needed to turn up. Didn't know anything about transformational transitioning services or any of that language. And again, just got in there and read some stuff around what that means, how we do that, what does it look like from a delivery perspective, and then started kind of just chipping away at that, and then ended up getting a job there, and then working through that transitioning stuff. And I did stuff like property refit. I did a transformation of it was called, so these days it's called Office 365. So you're doing a transformation, it's digital, it's Office 365. Back then it was called just a common office environment. So just everyone had a standard set of tools and blah, 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 all that stuff. And so learnt a lot about that, and then realised that I didn't want to keep working for the same company. I just wanted to do something else. And so then applied for a job with Unisys. And again, like, I didn't have any skills in that space. I just applied thinking, just give this a crack. The person interviewing me, the woman who interviewed me, like, it was all about your fit for team, and could you lead them? Could you figure it out? Could you do that? And so that's what I did, probably much to the team's horror. But we did it, and it was just about testing myself all the time, and being comfortable to be able to take the hits and take the feedback, and not take it on board and let it define you.
Yeah,
I mean,
so really,
you got to get feedback that actually really annoys you, but you got to figure out a way to put it away, right? And so I've been pretty lucky that I've got lots of good people that I've worked with over the years, where I can just be quite frank and free with letting it out. And having kids helps, trying to get stuck in and do their stuff, which is way more interesting and exciting sometimes than dealing with work challenges.
Absolutely. I was just putting a little note there in the timestamp. So I just wanted to come back to having talked about the applying for roles that we don't have any knowledge or experience, and by coming back to the buying the books on the unified modelling and doing your research and pursuing away, coming back. Everyone would have seen through LinkedIn that famous quote, I think, is pinned to Richard Branson, which is, if you get offered an opportunity, you don't know how to do it, just say yes and work it out later. So it's sort of in that sort of space. But what I really want to focus on is the fact that you took it upon yourself to research something and upskill yourself so you could go into the workplace and get the job and deliver, which I think is a skill that some of the discussions I hear with young people these days, there's a sort of I don't know if it's a time of the sort of how where society is at these days, but there's almost as some sort of expectation that things will be handed to them. Whereas you've actually got to go and work, and you've got to use your initiative, like your example, and you've got to pursue your dreams, chase your dreams, make it happen. Time waits for no person. You can't. So,
you got to back yourself, right? Even if your social circle, your community, of your own village isn't doing what you're doing, you have to actually want it. And like I said, I mean, for me, the great motivator was money and feeding a kid and doing what I needed to do as a mum, and working out how to juggle all that stuff. And because I don't have any qualifications, so I finished high school, did a few papers, and didn't take that any further. But my thing is, I read a lot. I still read today. I read lots of stuff on Twitter, what businesses are doing from a global perspective, how that applies to New Zealand. Like, I'm naturally inquisitive. But I guess for people coming into it, what I talk about in community-based settings is you have to figure out what your skills are and know. So if you're a good reader, that's great. You just keep doing that and working out what else you're good at. Like, I'm a good reader. I've got a good memory. I could recall. And I think that was one of the early things I realised was a good thing, was that I could recall contract schedules and replay that back in meetings when it perhaps wasn't my remit to do that. But if a meeting didn't sound like it's going well, I would just like pop up and say something in response to the client, because it just seemed to make sense. And I think it was just one of those things. I never really kind of thought that, I'm at this level, so I need to be quiet. I just thought, well, if we're all in a meeting, we must be, you must be allowed to talk, like, shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I've
Probably
got
it
to.
wasn't the case at all. I wasn't supposed to talk, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got to confess that as a young person, I didn't. So yes, I grew up with the respect your elders general thing. So anybody with who was a bit older was an elder and experienced and to be respected. But I remember in one of my first big meetings, I excitedly kept chipping in and talking, and afterwards I got that feedback. Ryan, next time, sit down, shut up, and observe. You don't know everything. In fact, you
Oh
know
yeah,
nothing.
like yeah.
And I was
Not like
blown
I haven't
away.
had that feedback.
I was blown
Yeah,
away
yeah.
by it. And you talked before about you've got to work out how to put it aside. That just made I went quiet for 6 months. I barely spoke to anyone in any instance in the workplace. I was just like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, it took a
I
little
think
while
I
to
think
come back from that one, but yeah. So,
I think to be
talk,
honest, I think I was because I was young. Like you're resilient, right? You're not ever like from my background is I had come from a reasonably good family um, with some really terrible things that happened in my upbringing. But that I just always thought if I could get out, I could make my own choices and I would put myself where I wanted to be. I would be safe, I would be fed, I would be able to do those things and I would do them independently. Even though my husband and I we've been together for a really long time, I just didn't want to be in a position where I couldn't look after myself. And I think
well,
that's the driver. It is about like for me, it was about my background, where it came from. And
yeah,
so it looked great. The picture was great, but the reality was pretty stark. And so um, that was a driver. And and I didn't ever want to be without choice. That was the big thing for me. And I would take feedback, and it's not like but I was resilient because I just thought, well, it's not nearly as bad as living at home. It wasn't nearly as bad as working at social welfare where it was violent and you saw that, like there would be gang rumbles on the street. And so we'd just go and have a hot chocolate and sit there and wait it out. It was just, you look back on it and think these days the officers have security and cameras and blah. We never had any of that. People bring their dogs in and let them
yeah,
off like torment you, basically. Or they would torment you in your lunch hour walking down the street. So I kind of look at those situations and where we came from and what we had to put up with as young people working in a front facing job of that nature. Um, Anything in IT that I came across, any kind of sense of um, racism or sexism, was just it was bad. But in the context of what I experienced already, I was like, oh well, it's not like a punch in the face, really, to be honest.
yes, yeah. Especially when you're just
There are
talking
worse
about
things.
having
There are worse
gang
things.
rumbles outside, it could be a very different picture to a few nasty words from a nasty, small-minded person. But that was one of the things that I was going to raise with you, as we discussed, was around being one of or the only Pacific Island person in IT, probably for a number of years, and also woman. So there's a couple of potential prejudices, and being a mum, especially back in the day. I think they're different places. There was a lady, Janine Morris, who you may know through IT, who actually took her three children into work, as she was solo mum, took her three children into work, and that workplace supported her having the kids in their bassinet on her desk, and everyone in the office was a babysitter when she had to go to a meeting or whatnot. So she was very fortunate, and that was going back started back 20 years ago, back in that
Yeah,
time when that sort of stuff
yeah,
wasn't accepted.
yeah.
And
I used to take
yeah,
my kids into the office, and yeah, I'd certainly get some looks, that's for sure. Like there just wasn't really an option, And then we had a second son, and my husband worked overseas, and I remember having to take him in. I think I went back. He was like 4 weeks old, and I went back to work. And again, it's just like stupid on my part looking back, like I didn't need to do that, but I really wanted to do the job, so I did it. And that's benefit of hindsight. Don't do it, ladies. You're mental. Just leave it. Stay at home.
yeah.
Look after yourself. And I remember taking Ethan in his capsule, and he was asleep, putting him under the desk and doing work, and people, and it was an all male environment as usual. That's what I came through in a working sense. So I didn't even really think about it. Just put him down, and started working, and like men kept coming up, going, this isn't right. You should be at home. I was like, cool, thanks so much for feedback. You just go away and leave me alone. I'm only in here for like 4.5 hours. I've got to smash this out, right? I have time for the
Yeah.
time
Hey,
for dealing with
I'm like
lawyers.
a kid. Yeah, or else you'll be,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Nobody's
know.
asked us to look after the baby. Just go away and leave me alone to it. Whereas these days we can work from home, so nobody actually has to, there's those times when it happens is few and far between, which is we're lucky now. But yeah, back in the day when the cell phone was almost the size of my bottle bag, it's just as heavy. Yeah.
We had a friend. We had a friend in the police. We were talking about this, and he had the cell phone that had the carry case and the stretchy cord. So it was almost like a desk phone. And
Dude, that's like from the war.
he used to play softball with us. Well, he used to play softball in the team that Dad coached, and he'd have that on the side of the field, so that if he needed to be called to a job, like the phone would ring, and someone would be like, Hayden, your bag's ringing. And he's like, oh, yeah, can you answer that? And they go, Hayden's phone. And like, no one had one of these things. Everyone's like, what are they doing? And they're like, oh, I think you better take this, Hayden. So he'd come off the field, and then you're like, yep, got to go, and you'd
We
jump
weren't
in.
quite that bad. Ours wasn't quite that bad, but yeah, it used to be quite heavy with the bottle bag and the baby and the woman mobile phone. So yeah,
Well,
it was
what
quite
about
good when we got
luggables?
to.
Did you ever
Sorry?
did you ever use a luggable? This is pre-laptop. So a luggable was about the size of a suitcase. When I was a little kid,
No, not at all.
but Dad had to come up to her work to carry it down and put it in the boot of the car because it was I can't even put the size on screen. It was a suitcase size, and the thing opened up with a little thing like that, and the screen would be about this big, but the back end of it would be the size of a suitcase. No,
No, I was
okay.
pretty lucky when I worked at EDS. They set me up with a desktop at home. So I had a desktop in the office and a desktop at home, so I could work from home. And they connected it all. They sent some clever clogs person around to set me up so I could do that as well.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
was pretty lucky. I didn't have to. The only thing I lugged around was the baby.
So, thinking of young people today, and advice you'd give to young people looking at the IT community or as a career,
Yeah, for sure.
and whether it be just a young person, young Pacific Island person, young woman, young Pacific Island woman, all in any, what advice would you give to those people looking at tech and going, do I want to be part of that? Can I see myself
You
being?
do. Yes, you do. Yes, you want to be part of this. This is good. This is a good place to work, this sector. It's exciting. We do cool shit, right? So yeah, of course you do. Of course you
We'll put that on the slogan.
um
We do cool shit.
yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
like it. Yeah.
Best you bring concrete pills though, because you might need them.
Yeah. Yes. Well, hopefully
I
that's
guess
part of it.
from that perspective, I think the things that I talk about most is about the fact um, from an ethnicity basis, I guess I'm not a great subscriber to leading with my gender or my ethnicity. I'm sort of hoping I never got jobs because I was the only brown person that applied, but who knows? I don't know. Hopefully, it was about my skill set and what I bring to the table. Even if I'm not particularly good at, I've improved with writing my CV. But yeah, the early days probably not so great. So I suspect there might have been a little bit of that, mixing it up a bit in the team. Um, but I think that's the big thing. We are what we're born, and we're lucky, and so that's what we bring to the table. But that doesn't define us or how we turn up to work. Because when we are employed, we turn up to work. They're not asking you to be your they're asking you to turn up and be that skilled resource that they have acquired. And that's the key thing. It doesn't mean that you leave your values and your principles at the door. It means that you are bringing the whole of you to that place of employment, and that's what you do. One of the challenging things that, and this is across all sectors, particularly in the Pacifica space, is that a lot of our young people in technology are facing situations where you grow up and you get a job, and then you provide, you give money back into your families. If there's a funeral, you give money, whatever. So that's a normal thing, pretty common knowledge. One of the challenges is how to balance it out with being able to get yourself to work and to be able to organise yourself to turn up to work. And so that's that fine balance of your commitment to your family and your commitment to yourself to remain employed.
Oh, that's
And
a really
so, you know, those are, and it doesn't mean that you are any less of a part of your family if your commitment to remain employed means that you are unable to attend a funeral or to give whatever number of dollars you're required to. And that's a really tough thing to navigate. And there's no easy answer for that. And every family has to deal with that. Every person of ethnicity. That's part of what we do. We do that, but it's a matter of how you figure that out with your own people, and it's not easy, right? But for people in technology, if you can't expect to go to a funeral and be away for 5 days and then come back to work and everything's hunky-dory, and then and we have big families, so you actually sometimes in a given year there may well be 4 or 5 people that pass, and so it is difficult to navigate that. Which one am I going to go to if this happens? How do I feel about this? Am I going to expect to? Am I going to get in? What's the impact of me going to the 3rd funeral, the 4th funeral, the 5th funeral? And so that's the reality. It's not just for our sector either. That will be something that most employers contend with. But yeah, so I'd sort of take it from that perspective. As a person of ethnicity, if we want to remain employed, we have to be practical about this.
yes.
This kind of thing.
It's a really interesting subject, and I've just been thinking of different parts of my experience over the years with that. So my best friend growing up, a kid across the road, is John McKerra, who's a Cook Islander, and the reference in different stories, but we end up getting nicknamed Two Boys because you call one name, you got two boys, and it was quite a good insight growing up because I lived Cook Island culture probably more than our culture because I spent most of my time at his place. But yeah, the point you make around the potentially number of funerals and the impact that it has emotionally on a person. So you can't not have the emotional impact of a loss. You can't turn that off, but say legally or technically, you've only got 5 days bereavement holidays per year in the old contract.
Yeah.
And you'll see different places now, different contracts are changing. And I worked in one place only a couple of years ago as a contractor, but still had what was it? The company gave you, aside from the legal, statutory, or whatever sick days and bereavement days, they gave you an extra 10 days, whatever you want. So they said, if you want to just have a day off, a mental health day, or you want to go to the beach for the day, take one of your 10 days, and that's on us. So it wasn't that they had an unlimited access, but they gave an extra thing and said, your responsibility, you use it. So if you need to go to extra funerals or you need to hang out on the beach, you choose, but you've got it to make use of. And some people
I think most companies are looking like that now, like there's that. It's all about the whole of the person these days, right? Regardless of what sector you work on, and particularly in technology, because we do tend to work really long hours. We're not, it's not subscribed and it's not something you'd get interviewed for, but yeah, are you available to work? That's the question. So what does that mean? Oh yeah, okay, yep, I'll do 7 days, sweet as. And that's not possible for everyone, right? And when, particularly for me, when I'm running large teams or any number of people, you have to contend with that stuff because not everyone is available all the time, and so it's easier, I think, to work in technology now, um, because we are able to do that, think about the whole of the person and what they're bringing to the table, and navigate what that means for achieving the outcomes that you're actually needing to get to without um, without offending or isolating any one member of your team, because it isn't an ethnicity thing. It is we are people who come with a family of and things. We've got stuff. And so that's the nice thing about the growth that technology has come through. And I know there's a lot of language around the gender and diversity and stuff, but I think, like we talked the other day, I didn't really see that because I just am what I am. Like, I just am a Fijian. I just look like this, and I never really thought about that because, as I was saying to you before, when I worked for social welfare, that was a big thing too. That they would have whānau. I didn't actually know what a whānau was because I'm Fijian. That's not the language of Fiji. That I didn't even know that was a Samoan word. I actually thought that was a Maori word. So I didn't even know that stuff when I was a kid. So it's all about your perspective, right? And so even now in that Pacifica space, it's I'm quite mindful and respectful of the fact that I do believe in diversity, but it's a diversity of thinking, it's a diversity of experience and what we're bringing to the table.
Absolutely, the neurodiversity. And I think a lot of people naturally pin neurodiversity to different looking people, but it's different
Well, you
experiences.
tick the box there, Brian.
Hey?
Good one. I said you tick the box there.
Well, that's that. No, this is a
For
thing.
both of us.
It takes a little bit of effort and awareness for people to detach neurodiversity from physical diversity. And the example is, if you had two copies of me sitting here, and we talked about the two different experiences growing up, and described one being very different to the other, then there's a good example of neurodiversity. Simply me growing up in a family with two boys, that's different to a person that grows up in a family of a brother and a sister, or three kids or five kids. And that's just one element alone, and people don't realize the quite different thinking. And I had a guy in my class who was a middle child of 14, and he was having to be a European Pākehā, and in case anyone was expecting him to be something else. And he was a really quiet kid, but the middle kid supposedly always is, because the oldest one's the biggest and the noisiest, and the youngest one's the smallest and the loudest, as in crying. So the one in the middle was, but he was extremely quiet. Whereas me, I'm the youngest of two, and I'm probably the more extroverted. My brother is a software developer himself, and he will have his nose in front of a computer coding for hours without concern. Whereas me, I've got to look for a conversation somewhere after a couple of hours, or I go a bit stir crazy. So there's some simple neurodiversity for people that think it's purely about how we look. It's actually about how we think, which I believe is driven largely by our experiences. So coming back to you, one of the wee questions wanted to sort of ask was get a little bit of an idea of what you do in your role, not just for me, but for those listening and those that will look at this later and go, what is a program director? If I'm 16 now and I go into entry level help desk, how do I get to being a program director, and what does that actually do? So if you,
Right. So I run. So it's a delivery job basically, and so you have a number of different projects, and across that is a management layer that is responsible for ensuring that the strategic direction and vision is delivered through some tactical activity, guess, is a simple way to explain it. Is that simple?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how many people would you be looking after? And that's direct reports and indirect the teams that they support.
So the interesting thing about a program of work is that the people work with you. So you have a number of project managers and some other people. They work with you, and so though you're a manager in terms of you are the throat to choke if this thing goes.
I like to say the handshake.
Anyway, I can't even think of a non-profanity using statement for
Well,
it.
you go.
You're
Okay,
the
that's fine.
you're the person that's going to have to explain to the CIO and the executive leadership team why this isn't going well, why it's not tracking, why it's failed, all that stuff. So so that your teams can be successful. And so the thing is that they work with me. They have their own line managers, but I build them as a team so that we can have that singular focus of delivering to each of their prescribed tasks that they have to do.
Okay.
And that delivers a big picture thing. So for instance, like we might be building a new microwave oven. This is a simplistic way to do it. To build that microwave oven, there might be about 25, 30 streams of work. Each of those 25 or 30 streams of work has a person that's solely responsible for all of the tasks, all of the actions that have to happen to build the widget that goes into building a microwave oven. And then there are side streams for that as to the communication. So how we're going to do the marketing plan, how we're going to talk about this on Facebook or Instagram or whatever the case may, whatever platform we have to market it on. And then at the end of that, we deliver it up to the boss of microwave ovens and go, ta-da, a functioning microwave oven, simplistically.
Brilliant. So in a way, program director is almost like the CEO of the project delivery. So if the microwave oven is the project, you're talking about the different streams of work to make the widgets that make it, but then also the marketing to communicate and sell it. It almost sounds like a little company within that program.
Yeah. And you're responsible for not just the actions, but also the financial trajectory and the cadence of that job. So it's not just about the rhythm of the delivery and what you're doing. It's also about are we doing this work in the most efficient way possible? Are we utilizing the resources, the people? Are we utilizing their skill sets in the right way? Have we got the right people? If we don't, how do we swap people in and out? It's all about that. That's kind of all the parts of a jigsaw puzzle that will enable us to deliver something that the business was expecting.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to summarize that as yes, like the CEO of the project and the project managers who look after the different streams of work. They might have a bunch of streams of work. Your senior managers and their teams that are doing the streams of work are the departments or the teams. And that's kind of the way I think about it in my little brain. And it's a good, nice analogy, especially using the microwave oven, because every teenager knows what a microwave oven is for. Yep.
How do you cook noodles without a microwave oven, right? Apparently.
There are some creative ways. As a student, I had a look at a few different creative ways, including using my not Bunsen burner, but the billy stove I had for camping. But there's a whole long story behind that. So,
I was just going to say, just thinking back about the whole IT thing, probably one of the things that I probably didn't say, because there's a big thing at the moment around the sexism and racism stuff. There's no way that isn't something I experienced or sometimes experience today. But it's again back to that resilience. It's just something you just got to accept. Just look the way you do, and so people will say things in a fashion that you either take it as a fed, so you just keep walking like it's not a thing. And I mean, I don't just experience, for me, racism isn't something that is about working. I more recently tried to go to a jewelry store. So I live in the Hutt Valley, and went to a jewelry store, and I don't usually typically dress as if I'm going to work in the weekend. So I was in my usual hoodie and beanie, went into the jewelry store, needed to get a butterfly for an earring. Took my paperwork with me because I didn't want the lady to think that I'd stolen earrings. Um, and then couldn't get served because their stuff was really expensive. So
Wow.
we're in 2021, and I couldn't get served. Well, she served me, but she basically told me to get out. And I walked away thinking, no, that's really, that's really interesting.
That's pretty
That that
disgusting.
well, the thing is that there's a lot around LinkedIn and on the media about gender bias and racism and all that stuff. It's it's just it's just a fact of life. It's really unfortunate, and for those of us who look different, we just have to be resilient and know that actually it's how we're turning up in the world, what we're doing with our children, where our children, my children, will experience racism and do experience it. It's a matter of just we have to be thick-skinned. We've got to just carry on because what we're doing is much more interesting and fun than dealing with someone who is small-minded and stupid.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of things pop out of my head, and one of those, no, we shouldn't have to face it. We shouldn't have to deal with it. But it's also, and I haven't quite looked into all the science. Part of my background was psychology. That's an area I really enjoy. But within my networking training course I'll talk about the fight, flight, and fright system, which keeps us alive. And we remember negative things 6 times more than positive things because that's where the saber-toothed tiger is hiding the bush. I won't go past that bush, it'll eat me. And we also, with our sight, we only see a 50-cent coin of detail and our brain makes up the rest. So we instantly are benchmarking everything. I've seen it before, I know what it is. I've seen it before, I know what it is. So racism, I think, goes back to a biological time of you're different. Okay, now we all live in a world where we're globalized and we can see and touch, feel, talk to everybody and anybody. Back in the cave person days, oh, you're different. So it was a protection thing. But I sort of think we now live in a time where we're globalized. We can communicate around the world, across the world. We have over 220 ethnicities living in this country alone. Therefore, we need to bring our thinking to this level. And the other thing I was thinking is, I've only been in a situation once or twice where I've been the minority. Once was Singapore, and I was standing in the train station trying to follow my brother, who's like 6 foot plus, and everyone else was still shorter than me. And I was going, oh, excuse me, oh, sorry, oh. And it's like Crocodile Dundee in the train station. He's, my brother was at one end, and he turned around and goes, what are you doing?
I felt tall living in Malaysia. I felt tall living in Malaysia. It was amazing, and I'm so short.
And he called out, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to get through. He goes, just walk. So we're having this conversation over everyone's heads. And I was like, but I don't want to smash into anyone. And not one person even stopped to look or listen to what we're saying. And he said, just walk towards me now, do it. So I just started walking, and the sea of people just moved around you and you moved around them. It just happened. But it was so different because to me, my normal thing would be to, A, there would never be that many people in New Zealand, and B, you would courteously say, oh, excuse me, and walk around them, or, not, but it was just an eye-opener, like, this is different. So I often wonder, actually through LinkedIn, a friend put on a post, and she's Samoan, and there was an event in Wellington, and her 10-year-old son, and this was her comment on LinkedIn, said, my son turned around, it was a Pacific event, turned around and said to me, this is what it feels like to not be the odd one out. So, I sort of, one of the things I think is, what would it be like if I went and lived in Fiji, or if I went and lived somewhere where I was the...
we're pretty cosmopolitan in Fiji. You wouldn't be the only person looking like that.
Well, when I was there, I was wearing a rugby jersey, and everyone just went, "Oh, you're a
Oh, that would
Kiwi."
love that.
I
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
even a
absolutely.
rugby jersey, but they all just went, "You're a Kiwi." I was wearing a rugby jersey.
Yeah.
So I was pretty welcome. But yeah, I just sort of rambling all over the place. But ideally, we can just take people for who they are and what they add to the picture rather than what they look like, and have an issue with that for any reason. But that
I think for the majority of us, that's what we do. The majority, that is exactly what happens. We just do that. We do it because that's normal. The moments where that doesn't occur, those are not normal. But for young people, that's their lens because, like I live in Wainuiomata. Um, I remember taking some girls to a Women in Leadership breakfast event and got them to come to Wellington. Now, I just said to them, like, don't even worry. People will be so thrilled that you came out from Wainuiomata and drove nearly 2 hours in traffic to get here. Like, you will be so celebrated. And they were. The women speakers were thrilled that they made the event at that time in the morning, and they're 11. And so it's more about giving, if you can, you give your time to showcase these things so that they're not for someone else. You can only have that if you're living in a flash house, or you can only have that if you live in the hut over the hill. Whereas actually it's just the hill. Like, don't even think it's a thing.
well, there's a
Um,
great movie called A Knight's Tale, and I don't know if you've ever seen it. Heath Ledger is
yeah.
the I don't know what the correct term is, but he's trying to become a knight or joust, and his father, who he somehow gets separated from, says something like, "You can change your stars." And whenever I saw that, I always thought, "Yep, if I want to, I'll change my stars." But it was, yeah, that moment for me. But hey, look, we're just coming up on 11 o'clock, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a summary, which is me waffling to give you time to think of your closing remarks, where you can cover anything that you'd like to about IT, about people, about your choices, your advice for young people. But just to summarize, it's been a beautiful session getting to know you and getting to share your story. I think it will be an amazing inspiration to a lot of people, whether they're young or not. It'll be an inspiration about getting into the IT industry. I think it will especially be an inspiration for young women and also young Pacific people, because the stats are pretty terrible about the number of Pacific people in IT, and we would love to have more. So we trying to inspire them with your story, which I believe will happen. But the two things that really stood out for me were applying for the job and wanting to get that job, even though you didn't have the skill base for it, and the self teaching, getting the books and learning about unified modeling, which is another name for agile, if anyone didn't see that at the beginning. And really, you have. I use the term groundbreaker, or carved the path. So you have really, made it happen for yourself, which is a beautiful story for anyone. And if anyone is out there sitting back going, "Oh, I wish I could," or maybe I should, here's the story to say, "Yep, go and give it a go, and look what happens. You can achieve what you'd like to, even if you don't think you can, or you don't have the skills at the time or the experience. Just give it a go and put the effort in. And in your words, commit to doing the job and see it through." So with that,
Mm.
I'd like to invite you to share your closing remarks for today's Yarn Live, and thank you very much at the same time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Ryan. I guess the thing is, for regardless of where you're at in your stage of life, it's about just having the confidence to do something and do it for yourself. And also knowing that you must be surrounded by some really good people who you class as clever, or whatever your reference point is. Just talk to them, take their advice, and figure out how to work out your CV, what cover letter might be, how you turn up to an interview. look on LinkedIn. Like, there's heaps of things. Reach out to random people. I used to ask people questions all the time. So questioning, reading, talking, that's one of the key things, I think. And trusting yourself, back yourself. Like, that's the thing. There's plenty of
Absolutely.
detractors out there. If you don't back yourself, you'll definitely not be able to work in any sector, because, yeah, as any one of us adults can attest to, there's plenty of people's feedback.
I'm just dropping that into the closing note, and I'll go back and edit that with additional points that you made. But I just want to say thank you so much. And normally I would say ka kite ano, but if we were to say goodbye in Fijian, I know how to say hello, but what would be goodbye in Fijian?
Sa mote.
Sa mote?
Mote.
Mote? So
M-O-C-E. Mote. Mote manda. M-O-C-E. Mote. Like that. More there.
Oh, more ve with a V.
Thank you, Ryan. There.
Sorry, I keep going to say it as you keep teaching me, so I keep over talking the lesson. My apologies.
It's 11:02. See ya.
Thank you so much. Been magic. Thank you so much. All right. See you later, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.